Sean right here with Peter McGough and Bob Ciccarillo. We're on the countdown to the Joe Weider 49th Annual Mr. Olympia Weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada. But right now we're here in Rosemont, Illinois for the NPC Junior National Bodybuilding Championships. But let's get things started off, Bob, as we're at the halfway point of the IFBB Pro season leading into the Joe Weider Mr. Olympia. We got things started off with history being made with Dexter Jackson tying Flex Wheeler with his 4th championship at the Arnold Classic.
And not only tying history, Sean, but I think a win that a lot of people didn't see coming. A lot of people, a lot of critics out there writing Dexter off. His last few outings, not the best, other than that Masters Olympia title. But that's a different lineup.
Right.
This is the Arnold now, the big time, the big boys, second biggest lineup to the Olympia. And all Dexter did was come in the best shape we've probably ever seen him and take his 4th title, tying Flex Wheeler.
Not to mention, he did it at like 43 years old. So does that make it even more remarkable in what Dexter achieved by comparison to what Flex Wheeler achieved? Because Flex had a Hall of Fame lineup that he had to win those 4 championships against.
Yeah, I mean, Dexter's career has lasted longer than Flex's. To improve at 43 years of age is probably unprecedented. And it wasn't like he came into the sport late. I mean, he's been a pro for like 15 years,
right.
And he's getting better. It's remarkable.
Yeah, and all he did was go on to Australia a week later and win that championship for, I think, another 4 or 5 time out there with Tony Doherty. We went from Germany over to Spain, and I believe over in Spain we had another champion come along in the form of, was it Ronnie Rockel, I believe it was.
And I'll tell you, Ronnie Rockel needed a win, big time. We saw his best at the Olympia about 2 years ago, I think it was, and he kind of established himself as a contender, standing next to Dexter Jackson and actually being competitive. But then he just seemed to slide after that, and we haven't seen that version of Ronnie Rockel since that competition. That's the best he had in Spain thus far, but then he's had a few shows since and continues to slide. But, a little bit rocky approach from Ronnie Rockel for the last half a year now.
Yeah, he's been kind of up and down.
But let's not forget, I mean, Ronnie's gone on record saying that he's now a diabetic. That's got to have some sort of effect. The fact that he's still competing is, hopefully he's taken medical advice on the whole thing. But you're right. 2 years ago, he looked like he'd broken through. The old strike against him was great from the front, not so good from the back, but then he got the back and then he lost the back.
Yeah, I don't think he's doing the Dexter Jackson, Tony Freeman getting better with age thing. It might be on a decline.
Well, what can we say about Cedric McMillan? I mean, Cedric McMillan a year ago won the New York Pro Championships, comes back this year, kind of falls flat on his face, but he did nab a victory over in Germany.
We could sit here an hour and talk about Cedric. Arguably the guy with the best genetics, the best potential. But as you've often said, Sean, potential only gets you so far in this game. At some point, you've got to realize the potential, and you've got to put it out there against the best. And I don't think it's an issue with his physique. I think it's kind of more up here. I think Cedric's got to get himself in the frame of mind and start getting that killer instinct. We've had interviews with him where he says, well, listen, people, they talk about going in the war and bodybuilding, and listen, I've been to war and this and that. This ain't war. But he's got to adopt that mentality that this is war, that this is, he's got to put food on his table and feed his kids. When he gets that killer instinct, I think you'll see a Cedric McMillan worthy of the top 6 at the Olympia.
You're absolutely right. I interviewed Lee Haney, and Lee Haney said maybe there's an issue here because this is more, it seems kind of a hobby. This guy is a full-time employee of the government. He works for the military. So Lee Haney, when he was winning all those championships, was a father and a bodybuilder. He thinks that maybe that distraction could be taken away from the commitment that would bring the excellence that Cedric needs on a consistent basis, and there's a little bit of an issue there.
Well, I mean, Lee Haney did have the family and was still the best bodybuilder in the world. Cedric, is he hungry enough? Does he want it enough? Is he focused? After what happened in Brazil where, he was a no-show, I mean, he turned up in New York and it looked like he just wasn't ready. Another bodybuilder would have said, okay, you kept me out of Brazil, I'll show you bastards, I'm coming back with all guns flying. It's not a knock against him as a man. You're right, okay, it's not war, but for the time that you're in bodybuilding, you have to sort of be in a vacuum and say, okay, everything goes to the side. Now I'm focused on this 100%, and I'm hungry for this.
Yeah, Ronnie Coleman was able to do that in spades, being a cop out in Arlington.
No, yeah, and keep in mind, Sean, we had Cedric on a while back on the radio show, and I remember making the comment that he was in uncharted waters, that we haven't seen Cedric compete in multiple shows throughout a year in his career. He's never done that. And he proved exactly what we feared, which was that not everybody can do that. Tony Freeman can do that. He can go out there 6-7 times a year, seemingly get better as he goes. I'm not so sure that's the best method for Cedric. I think you might want to see him pick and choose shows, but Peter's right. He's got to put all his cards into that.
Well, he left the door wide open for a guy to come back in the form of Brandon Curry. This guy's on his third or fourth kid right now, in the process, a former USA overall champion, kind of a diamond in the rough, had a lot of issues getting the conditioning right, but Cedric's absence left the door wide open for him to go to Brazil and win the first ever Arnold Classic.
One door closes, another one opens, and Brandon Curry walked right through that door, nabbed himself a title, and he shouldn't listen to any of the critics. Well, if Cedric was there, and well, if Cedric was competing. Listen, that's got nothing to do with nothing. He was on stage. He rightfully earned that title. And I got to commend him. I mean, Peter, he's done a lot of work to get that lower body to match that tremendous upper body. And it looks like he's almost got it now.
Yeah, but he's had a good year, bad year throughout his career since he turned pro. He made the Olympia 2 years ago, got 8th. Then last year didn't qualify. Now he's won a show, his first pro show. And you're right, the legs are coming up. That upper body, especially that shot where he does the double biceps, then leans to the left, that is classic.
Old school.
That's old school.
Yeah. He's put himself in a very good position to be noticed coming at the Mr. Olympia weekend. But a guy that came out of nowhere, right into New York, boom, knocked everybody on the mouth, and that was that big Ramy guy.
Ain't that something? Boy, I'll tell you what, you talk about a knockout. We heard a lot about Big Ramy leading up. Dennis James is kind of running his camp over there. He won the Arnold Amateur, I believe it was, the Amateur Olympia, as it would be. And so you started to see a little bit of smattering out there about this guy. We saw pictures, we saw video, but Dennis kept telling me, the pictures don't do him justice, bro. Wait till you see him in person. I tell you what, DJ was not kidding. In person, this guy is tremendous. He's huge, but he's put together. He's got a small waist for a big man. He's not really lacking any body parts. Calves arguably can be brought up, but hooch can't. And I tell you what, man, he not only established himself winning that show easily over a much improved Victor Martinez coming back from all his stuff, but he's on the map. This guy, I say, is a top 3, top 4 contender right now.
Yeah, he looks like the next coming of a Nasser El Somebody with a smaller waist, but he did beat a Victor Martinez on the comeback trail. Victor was not who Victor used to be back in the day, so it begs the question, if he looks that impressive against a weaker lineup called the New York Pro, he's really got to earn his stripes come the Olympia, because now he's got to peak twice in 1 year.
That's right. I mean, Victor wasn't at his best, but Victor maybe was better overall conditioned than Ramy was. Ramy seemed to have just a thin film of water there that blurred him, in certain areas. And let's not forget that the 18 other guys in the contest, only Victor and Marcus Haley have ever qualified for the Olympia.
Right.
So it wasn't the strongest lineup, although it was a young lineup with Juan Morel and De La Rosa and those guys in it. Big Ramy, I mean, he looked like the Michelin Man had suddenly got a gym membership and got a six-pack. That's what it looked like. He was just enormous. The size blew everybody away. It won't have that same shock value come the Olympia.
Yeah, the Olympia, I think it's going to be more of an even playing field. But I got to say, people like Branch Warren and maybe even Jay Cutler now are going to have to contend with this guy because he's more along the veins of that. But that being said, Victor on the comeback trail a week later tightened up, got a little bit smaller, got a little bit closer to Victor Martinez of old, and walked off with the Toronto Pro victory.
And I'm glad that Victor decided to go into Toronto. He was not in the best mood, as we both know, after the New York show. It was emotional for him, though. He's in his backyard. He was making his comeback. He was arguably, like Peter said, in probably in the best condition that we've seen him since that Olympia a few years ago, where he could have won the Olympia. But I think he did a tremendous job. I mean, you've got to give this guy his credit and his due, just to get back to where he was.
Yeah.
And like I say, if this guy, Big Ramy, doesn't come out of nowhere and take this title, he's got an easy victory there. But he put his eggs in the basket. He went to Toronto. He earned that title. And now he's back on the map. Not so sure I'd send him to the Olympia this year if I was running his camp. But I tell you what, a great step back. Next year, you got to watch out for Victor.
Yeah, he sounded like he's shutting it down after Toronto Pro and is content with what he did. He realizes that he's not going to go to the Olympia to just be an Olympian. He wants to go to the Olympia to win. So it sounds like we may see another reappearance at the Arnold Classic in 2014 for him.
Yeah, in a way, Big Ramy might have done him a favour. If Victor had won the show, he would have maybe thought, "I'm back." He was lean for Victor, so maybe the Arnold is a better move for him next time out.
Well, we're at the halfway mark, and coming up on the calendar next, we'll be right back here in Chicago for the Chicago Wings of Strength competition out here. There's a few guys we haven't seen this year. We haven't seen Steve Kuklo. Yeah. Last year's champion of the Chicago, Issei Obeid. A few guys still waiting to come out there and emerge to try to get to that Mr. Olympia. Who else is out there?
Evan Centopani is another one.
Centopani. Kuklo's going in the Dallas Europa. I know, and that's his hometown, so I tell you what, he's putting all his marbles into that one there. Probably not a bad move for Steve. Juan Morel, he is going to be going in one of these. I don't know if it's Chicago or Dallas, but he's really made some great improvements. He can get himself to the Olympia this year.
Yeah.
But as we all know, point system now. You got to win, or you got to point your way there, and we're starting to run out of shows now.
Yeah, we're still looking for Big Ben Pekulski. He had the offseason hernia surgery. Jason Huh may be coming back after having the kid. Jason Huh, yeah, I mean, he's out there in Sarasota, Florida. There's a few guys that still have an opportunity. They're going to have to do some battling to get there, because right now I think on points, Tony Freeman is leading the pack on the way to the Olympia.
Tony's got 30 points, and Tony kind of played a good strategy this year. I like Tony's approach. He got in there early. He got himself a bunch of points racked up. 30 points is enough to stay in the top 5, whether he competes again or not, until the Olympia. But normally what we see Tony kind of working his way down to the Olympia. By the time he hits the Olympia stage, I think he's a little bit burnt out. Hits the early shows. Now he's got some time off. Hits the Olympia. Could be his best shot for a top 6 finish.
Yeah, I mean, one guy we've mentioned before I'm impressed with is Juan Morel. I mean, he's the guy has made improvement in the years that he's been a pro. And although he's in his 30s, he's only been competing for 4 or 5 years, so there's a lot more potential there. He's got a tremendous frame. And like I say, he keeps making improvements in terms of shape and size.
Yeah, but there's a few guys that we've got little snippets of that we aren't going to see until the Olympia weekend. That's, of course, the 2-time champion in Phil Heath. Of course, the return of Jay Cutler, which is a lot of buzz going around now. I'm on the fence. I'm still not 100% sold that he's going to wind up on that stage. He says he is, but he's got to prove it. I got to see him walk out on that stage in shorts. What do you think?
It's all in Jay's hands, man. I mean, if I'm running his camp, I don't know if I put him on stage. And that's not a knock on Jay or where he is, but he's in uncharted waters. Let's face it, guys. He hasn't been out of the top 2 in over 10 years. He's either won or taken second, most of those to Ronnie Coleman throughout most of those years. Right. But he hasn't been on stage in over 2 years now. Just turned 40. You got some new physiques up there, and Big Ramy and some of these other guys. The Wolf, we haven't even mentioned yet. The Olympia is stacked. I mean, the most competitive Olympia to date coming up this year. I don't know if this is the time for a comeback. I don't even know if he ever really needs to step on the stage again.
Well, let's put it in perspective. 4-time champion of the Olympia, 3-time Arnold Classic winner, future Hall of Famer. If anybody can do it, is Jay Cutler equipped to do this? Well,
I was skeptical about him, coming back, even when he said he was coming back. But he looked me in the eye and told me he was. And I think he's taken on this persona. He's trying to go back to 2008, 2009, where everybody wrote him off. Jay's always better as an underdog than the top dog. And I think that's, in his own mind, it's motivating him at the moment. But I don't know what will happen if he gets 2 or 3 weeks out and he sees it's not happening. I mean, his legacy... he'll never lose it anyway. I mean, even Ronnie Coleman was 4th in his last Olympic.
Nobody remembers.
We don't remember that. Right. We remember the champ.
Yeah. Well, I think Jay's good with it. I'm with Peter. I don't think he loses anything with the legacy and all that stuff that people talk about.
But he has to compete.
He's got to compete. Well, he wants to compete, and that's the thing: is he hungry enough? Does he have that hunger inside to try and get that title back from Phil Heath? I think Jay's going to get to about the 6-week mark. Yeah, I think if he doesn't like what he sees in the mirror, if he's not where he thinks he should be, I think he pulls the plug, and I think he's wise to do that.
So far, it reminds me a lot of the Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis build-up right now. And, of course, Mike backed himself into a corner. Yeah. He had to go out there and fight the champ, and we saw what happened. I hope that's not the fate of Jay. Because right, I mean, Jay's record speaks for itself, but let's be real. Sean Roden, potentially with a full year off, can come back and be a better Sean Roden. That doesn't bode well for somebody like Jay.
No, I mean, but I think, what I said about Morel earlier on, not been training that long. Sean has, and he came through last year with tremendous condition, but he's still got to get some more upper body thickness and certain other things to be compared with Flex Wheeler, for instance.
Sure.
And whether you do that after you've been training for 15 years, I don't know whether that happens. Condition can be better, not much better than it was last year. But, I mean, if he maintains what he did last year, he's going to be up there.
Yeah. So what about Kai Green?
I was just going to say, we haven't even mentioned Kai Green yet. So I mean, we talked about a loaded lineup. We haven't even talked about Kai. Here's a guy again who's trouble for anybody on that stage. We've seen him all off season. Probably the best shape of all the guys in the off season. Now that means nothing, obviously, when it comes to actually getting on stage Olympia Day. But I tell you what, he's got a combination of mass and obviously his muscularity and everything else that goes into being Kai Green. Kai is kind of in a damn if you do, damn if you don't situation. If he tries to put on size, he gets blockier.
Yes.
Blockier's not going to beat Phil Heath. If he goes down and he tries to match Phil Heath, you're not going to out-pretty Phil Heath. So he's going to lose if he does that. So he doesn't play anybody's game. He just has to do his own thing. The big wild card there isn't Kai Green, though. It's Big Ramy. Even though he hasn't stepped on the Olympia stage, here's why. Branch Warren and Jay Cutler similar in physique in that they're, a little not the most aesthetically pleasing with the small weights like a lot of the other guys, the Dexters and the Phils and all those guys. But he's the best thing and the worst thing that can happen to those guys. Best in that they've got comparison. He compares to those guys. They're big, they're massive, they carry a lot of muscle. That can help those guys propel up, assuming Jay's in the show, and Branch. Worst in that he can beat them at their own game. If he's better than Jay and Branch, these guys are out on the outside looking in, trying to get in the top 6.
Well, which brings us to Branch Warren. I mean, he's on the comeback, clearly slid a few notches down the ropes, taking a year off. Is there any coming back when you add somebody like Ramy and you bring back a Jay Cutler? Where does that leave Branch?
Well, I think, we all know perception is part of bodybuilding, and that, everybody's sort of saying maybe Branch has seen his best days, but he is a warrior. But I do, with all respect to him, think that, maybe he can't come back to what he was, and he'll do everything in his power to do that. But just to go back to Kai Green, I think what's interesting about Kai earlier in the year, the way he looked, is the fact that, the way he looked. It's a mindset.
Yes.
Before he rolls around in that sort of, it seems to me that he was, if you can use the word lean, about somebody 280 pounds. Especially.
Yeah.
He seemed in better shape and bigger and harder than he's ever been at, 5 months out from the Olympia. So maybe there's something rolling on there.
There's no question that getting second place in the Olympia has got to be one of the best things to happen to a bodybuilder as far as motivation is concerned. And Kai Green got a nice little taste. He was third, and he's second. And he sees the lifestyle that it provides someone like Phil Heath. He's watching the champion in all of these venues being received as the champion, and he wants that. He can taste it. Victor had a sniff a few years back, and he's still trying to get there, and it's caused some injuries along the way. Branch Warren got a sniff, and he's gotten injured as a result. Jay Cutler's been there, and he got injured, and the question remains, can he overcome that adversity? I believe right now, especially in the offseason, Kai Green sits firmly in the driver's seat in terms of a very Ronnie Coleman-like mentality of trying to go after that title. I think the challenge is going to come from Kai Green.
I think the driver's seat belongs to Phil Heath. It's his show to lose or win. He's a 2-time defending champ. He's as confident as anybody I've ever talked to. He welcomes all these comers, but I think it motivates Phil. The one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to piss off Phil Heath, because you talk about the gift. I mean, you talk about just gifted natural ability to do what he does. I mean, he touches weights and he grows. We see him in the off season, and Phil's not like a Jay or a Kai Green. He doesn't walk around at 290 in pretty good shape. Phil actually, if anything, he might even get a little smaller, as doesn't need it like he does for a competition. He brings the training down. Phil's a thinking man's bodybuilder. He doesn't go crazy in the gym with ridiculous amounts of weights, and he's cognizant of not getting injured and all that kind of stuff. And he knows that he's Mr. Olympia. I think it's a smart approach, but I think you got to come and beat Phil at his own game. That's going to be tough to do.
That road is not without some controversy as well. He's battling. His wife has cancer, was diagnosed with some cancer, some breast issues that she's working with. He's got an ailing father that's getting up there in age, and he's dealing with that as well, and still trying to do the business of being Mr. Olympia. So it doesn't come that much easier this time. As a matter of fact, I think this is going to be probably one of Phil's biggest tests of his young career.
I think so, but I see two things with Phil. One, everybody said he was going to be Mr. Olympia for 10 consecutive years until, Kai Green came along on the Friday night.
Right. Yeah, and since that's still yet to be seen, we got some more of the competitions coming up along the way. Yeah. We still have Dallas. We still got Pro Bodybuilding Weekly in Tampa. Yeah. And then we wrap it up in Finland at the end of August, and then we'll wind up in Las Vegas. So all these questions are going to be answered. We know who the main players are, but let's see who's going to join the party come this September. But for right now, we're here in Rosemont, Illinois at the Junior National Championships, where we're bringing you all the contest coverage at musculardevelopment.com. For Peter McGough, Bob Ciccarello, I'm Sean Ray.